I used to think the world was exactly 6 feet in every direction. That's how far my chain reached. 6 feet of dirt, a doghouse that leaked, and a water bowl that froze in winter. I didn't know there was more until the day she called my name. And I realized I'd forgotten I had won. My name is Duke, though I haven't heard it in so long it sounds foreign when spoken aloud. For 5 years I've been dog, or shut up, or nothing at all. My world has boundaries you can count in steps. 6 feet from the oak tree to the fence, 6 feet from the house to the gate, 6 feet from the water bowl to the chain's anchor point. I know every stone, every root, every ant hill in my circle of packed dirt. I know which corner stays dry longest when it rains, where the morning sun hits first, and exactly how many links of chain I can stretch before the collar cuts into my neck. The chain itself is heavy, thick metal links that clink when I move, a sound that's become the soundtrack of my existence. It's attached to a collar that's never been removed, never been loosened, cutting a permanent groove into my neck where the fur no longer grows. The scar tissue is thick and numb now, but I remember when it first bit into my skin, when I was young enough to fight against it, to pull and struggle until my neck bled and my spirit broke. Humans see chains as restraint, as punishment. But chains become safety when it's all you know. Inside my circle, I knew the rules. Stay quiet unless there's a threat. Bark at strangers. Don't approach the house unless called. Don't play. Playing is for pets, not guard dogs. Don't show weakness. Don't show joy. Just exist, alert and ready. A living alarm system that requires only scraps of food and a leaking shelter. Outside my circle was unknown territory, and unknown meant danger. I was supposed to guard the house, but really, I was guarding myself from a world I'd forgotten how to navigate. The chain had become my cage, but also my security blanket. Beyond those 6 feet lay infinite possibilities, and infinite ways to make mistakes, to disappoint, to earn punishment worse than neglect. Mr. Peterson wasn't cruel in the way people imagine cruelty. He didn't hit me or starve me deliberately. He simply forgot I existed most days. Food appeared irregularly, sometimes daily, sometimes not for days. Water was refilled when he remembered, which wasn't often enough. In winter, I learned to break ice with my paws. In summer, I learned to dig shallow holes in the dirt to find cooler earth for my belly. I learned to survive on indifference, which is sometimes harder than surviving hatred. The neighborhood went about its business around me. Children walked to school, talking and laughing. Adults mowed lawns, washed cars, lived full lives just beyond my reach. I became part of the landscape, the big dog in the Petersons' backyard, as permanent and unremarkable as the tool shed or the broken fence. But I watched everything. I learned the rhythms of the street, the patterns of daily life. I knew which teenager snuck out at night, which couple fought behind closed curtains, which elderly woman fed stray cats at dawn. From my 6-foot circle, I became an unwilling observer of human life, understanding their routines better than they understood mine. The day everything changed started with shouting, not the usual kind. Mr. Peterson yelling at his kids to turn down the TV, or his wife complaining about bills. This was different. Official voices, sharp and purposeful. Badges catching sunlight. Clipboards and cameras, and the kind of authority that makes even negligent humans nervous. Through the fence slats, I saw the neighbor lady, Mrs. Henderson, who sometimes made eye contact when she hung laundry, pointing at me, talking fast to a woman in a uniform who kept writing things down. I'd seen Mrs. Henderson watching me over the years. Sometimes she'd linger by the fence, her face sad in a way I didn't understand. Sometimes I heard her talking to other neighbors about that poor dog. But talking and acting are different things, and I'd learned not to hope for rescue from people who only offered pity. But this was different. The uniformed woman approached my fence slowly, deliberately. Most humans who looked at me saw a big, scary dog. 90 pounds of German Shepherd mix with wild eyes and matted fur. She saw something else. "Hey there, beautiful boy," she said softly, crouching to my eye level. "What's your story?" The words hit me like physical touch. Beautiful boy. When was the last time someone called me beautiful? When was the last time someone wanted to know my story instead of simply cursing my existence? I'd forgotten humans could speak without yelling. I'd forgotten my tail could move without fear. But something in her voice, something gentle and patient, reached past 5 years of learned helplessness. My tail gave the smallest wag, barely perceptible, but the first voluntary movement I made toward a human in longer than I could remember. "My name is Sarah," she continued, settling into a comfortable position despite the dirt and gravel. "I'm going to help you, okay? It might take some time, but I promise you, things are going to get better." Promises from humans had meant nothing for so long that I'd stopped hearing them as more than noise. But there was something in Sarah's eyes, something that reminded me of who I used to be before the chain taught me to be afraid of hope. The legal process took weeks. Papers served, court dates scheduled, negotiations between lawyers and officials while I remained in my circle, watching the drama unfold around me, but never quite believing it involved my future. Mr. Peterson acted inconvenienced by the attention, irritated that his property management was being questioned. His wife seemed embarrassed, avoiding eye contact when officials visited. The children, I'd watched them grow from toddlers to school age, appeared confused about why strangers cared about the dog they'd learned to ignore. But Sarah came every day, always talking, never demanding. She brought better food, real dog food instead of table scraps and stale bread. She brought toys I didn't know how to use, rubber balls that bounced, rope toys meant for tugging, squeaky things that made sounds I found both fascinating and terrifying. She brought patience I didn't deserve, sitting by my fence for hours, sometimes reading aloud, sometimes just being present while I remembered how to trust. Slowly, carefully, I began to remember that humans could be kind, that voices could comfort instead of command, that hands could offer gentleness instead of threat. Sarah never rushed me, never forced interaction, never punished my fear or my hesitation. She simply showed up, day after day, proving through consistency what words alone could never convince me of. She told me about her family while we sat together. Her husband Tom, who worked construction and was initially nervous about big dogs, and her children Emma and Jake, who'd been begging for a pet for years. She described their house with its big backyard, the dog bed they'd already bought, the family meetings they'd held to discuss pet responsibility. She painted pictures with words of a life I couldn't quite imagine, but found myself wanting to believe in. "You don't have to be a guard dog anymore, Duke," she said one afternoon, using my name with such casual affection that it startled me every time. "You can just be a family dog. You can play and sleep inside and get belly rubs and learn what it feels like to be loved just for existing." The concept was so foreign it might as well have been a different language. Love just for existing? Without earning it through vigilance or intimidation, without proving worth through service or suffering. The idea was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The day they cut my chain, I didn't run. 5 years of boundaries don't disappear in one moment, even when the physical restraint is gone. The bolt cutters made quick work of the thick links, but the mental chains were harder to break. I stood in my familiar circle, free to move, but afraid to step beyond the invisible boundary I'd learned to respect. Sarah sat on the ground just outside my circle, hand extended in invitation rather than command. "It's okay, Duke," she said gently. "You're free. You can come to me now." But freedom was terrifying. What if I made mistakes? What if the world beyond 6 feet was too big, too much? What if I didn't know how to be a pet instead of a guard? What if I failed at being the family dog they wanted me to be? The chain had been my prison, but it had also been my definition. Without it, who was I? Then little Emma ran into the yard, Sarah's 8-year-old daughter, who'd been watching from the car with barely contained excitement. She moved with the fearless confidence of children who haven't learned to be afraid of big dogs or broken things. She plopped down right next to me, inside my circle, as if invisible barriers meant nothing to her. "Hi, Duke," she said, her voice bright with joy. "I'm Emma. Want to see our backyard? It's really big, and there's no chain anywhere." She reached for my collar, not to control or restrain, but simply to guide, her small hand gentle against my neck where the old collar had left its permanent mark. "Come on," she said, standing and taking a step toward the gate. "Our yard has grass and trees and a swimming pool, and Jake's in the car. He's my little brother, and he's been practicing how to pet dogs nicely." For the first time in 5 years, I took a step beyond my circle. Then another. The ground felt different under my paws. Not just the change from dirt to grass, but the sensation of walking without the familiar weight and restriction of the chain. My gait was awkward at first, unused to unrestricted movement, but Emma's chatter and Sarah's encouraging voice pulled me forward. The car ride to my new home was overwhelming. So many sights and sounds and smells rushing past the windows, the world bigger and more vibrant than I'd remembered. Jake, the 5-year-old, peppered me with questions from his car seat. Does he like toys? Can he swim? Will he sleep in my room? His excitement was infectious, gradually overriding my fear with something I'd almost forgotten existed: anticipation. Their house was everything Sarah had described and more. The backyard stretched farther than my eyes could measure, bounded by a wooden fence that enclosed space without restricting spirit. There were trees for shade, grass for rolling, and room to run in straight lines instead of tight circles. Most importantly, there were no chains anywhere. Tom, Sarah's husband, was gentle despite his initial nervousness around large dogs. He spoke quietly, moved slowly, gave me space to approach him rather than forcing interaction. "Welcome home, Duke," he said simply, and something in my chest loosened at the word. Home. The children were patient teachers, showing me how to play games I'd never learned. Fetch with tennis balls, tug of war with rope toys, the simple joy of running for the sake of running rather than pacing the perimeter of a 6-foot circle. They taught me that not all human attention was dangerous, that touch could comfort instead of threaten, that my size could be an asset for cuddling rather than just intimidation. The first night, they offered me a choice: sleep outside in the yard I now owned, or inside with the family. I chose outside, not from preference but from habit, from the learned belief that guard dogs belonged outside, separate, vigilant. But Sarah left the back door open, and sometime in the dark hours before dawn, I found myself padding inside, drawn by the warmth and the soft sounds of a family sleeping safely. I learned that freedom isn't about having no boundaries. It's about choosing your own. My new family's yard has invisible fences made of love and trust instead of metal and fear. I guard them now, not because I'm chained to them, but because I choose to protect what matters. My vigilance comes from devotion rather than duty. My loyalty from gratitude rather than resignation. The old collar has been replaced with a soft one that doesn't cut or restrict. The tags jingle when I move. Not the heavy clank of chain links, but the musical sound of identification and belonging. My name is engraved there in clear letters. Duke Morrison. For the first time in my life, I truly belong to someone who wants me to belong to them. Some humans spend their whole lives in 6-foot circles. Not physical ones, but mental chains forged by fear, habit, or others' expectations. They accept limitations as permanent, boundaries as immutable, restraint as safety. But I've learned that breaking free isn't about running wild or rejecting all structure. It's about taking that first step beyond what you've always known. Trusting that someone who loves you is waiting on the other side. The chain is gone, but I still carry its lessons. I know the value of security, the importance of loyalty, the strength that comes from surviving difficulty. But now I also know the joy of chosen service, the comfort of unconditional love, and the freedom that comes from being wanted rather than merely useful. Every morning when I wake up in my bed by the fireplace, when I stretch without the restriction of metal links, when I walk through the house I'm allowed to call home, I remember the 6-foot circle that once defined my world. Not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the journey that led me here. My story isn't unique. Countless animals wait behind invisible chains, hoping someone will see past their circumstances to their potential. Some humans spend their whole lives in 6-foot circles too, accepting limitations as permanent, believing they're not worthy of more. But I've learned that breaking free isn't about running wild. It's about taking that first step beyond what you've always known, trusting that love is waiting on the other side. Thank you for joining me on this journey from chains to freedom. Stories like mine remind us that it's never too late for second chances, and that love can transform even the most broken spirits. If Duke's story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel. We share more inspiring tales of rescue, hope, and the incredible bond between humans and animals every week. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to life. Until next time, remember, freedom isn't about having no boundaries. It's about choosing your own. And sometimes, the biggest step toward freedom is simply believing you deserve it.